I'm sure a lot of Steelers fans are coming to this episode with one thing in mind. Brett, EJ, please give us hope. Please tell us that the bad times are over. Please tell us that we won't be hilariously, sort of, kind of, slightly above average again for another year. Jay, roll the intro. All right, welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett. That's EJ. Talking Steelers today. This is a team that, like we said, has been remarkably gifted at being remarkably okay. They're never bad. They're never great. They're okay. They have a unique brand of football, which sometimes works really well. They run the ball. They play defense. They try not to turn the ball over. Kenny? And when it works well. That's why they're never going to finish below 500. The ceiling on that style of play can be tough to reach. You have to have a dominant offensive line. You have to have really good running backs. You have to have a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over, or maybe two quarterbacks that don't turn the ball over. You have to have at least one badass receiver that can just go make a play when you need to. And you need to have some difference makers on defense that can give you extra possessions because your margin for error is smaller.
And you can't get boat raced.
And you can't get boat raced because you can't keep up. Now, with the additions they've made, in theory, they can hit that ceiling a lot easier this year than previous years because, number one, they reformed the offensive line. We're going to talk about that a lot today. Yep. They had to reform the offensive line because they could not make this style of play work without it. If this group plays like we think they can, with all this injection of youth and explosiveness and everything over the last 2 off seasons, if they play like we think they can, this can work. This could be a playoff team. And maybe a playoff team that's kind of hard to beat in January because that particular brand of football works in the cold. If it doesn't work, i.e. if these offensive line picks don't live up to our personal expectations of them, and if Russ doesn't play at least average, and if Justin can't even just see the field, let alone play well, this is not a team that is built to, pivot, adjust, do literally anything else. They kind of have to make this style work or nothing is going to work. So, I know Steelers fans wanted us to be super rosy about it today, and we will be about the Steelers in theory, but the Steelers in theory versus the Steelers in practice have been two very different things over the last decade. So, I guess we'll see.
We will see, and we will be positive about areas of this team that have made significant positive strides. Big, good changes. And we're excited about those. Are they all the way there? They're not. Because to play competitive football in the modern NFL, they need certain things that we're not sure they have. We'll find out. Again, they're never going to be bad. They're going to be competitive. They're going to be in every game. Do they have enough to get them over the hump? The answer is we don't think so at key positions right now. The rest we'll see about.
They'll get to the hump.
Correct.
They'll be there. I wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's more so, can they... Well, Baltimore's a bad example. They're always going to give Baltimore a hard time. Can they beat Buffalo? Can they beat Houston in the playoffs? Can they beat Kansas City in the playoffs? Cincinnati, who we talked about yesterday. Well, actually, again, AFC North teams don't count. They're always going to give them issues. But the teams outside the AFC North, can they climb over that hill in January? Again, not sure they're built for that yet, but they're going in the right direction. So I think Steelers fans will at least be happy with that. It's not going to be objectively awful television like it was last year. It's not going to be hard to watch. So, silver linings and all that. Before we get into today and all the fun stuff, I do want to thank Underdog Fantasy for helping to make this show possible in the first place. If you guys are doing season-long pick'ems, those are up on Underdog right now. You don't have to wait till week 1 to do pick'ems. You can do season-long pick'ems for a variety of Steelers players at this point. I'll throw those up on screen right now. Or if you want to do baseball pick'ems or golf or literally anything else that's going on this summer, they have pick'ems for every other sport. You could even do best ball drafts. If you're trying to get ready for drafting in your home league, you can use best ball drafts as like the best possible mock drafts. Not even mock drafts, because people are actually in it. That's what makes them valuable, is they don't leave because they're best ball drafts. So you actually get more accurate preparation drafts. Let's call them that. You get more accurate preparation drafts for your home league if you do those on Underdog. So whether you're doing those or you're doing Best Ball Mania or Pick'ems or season-long Pick'ems, whatever you want, just check out Underdog. There's a variety of ways you can play and just enjoy sports. Again, that is the link in the description below or the QR code on the screen. Promo code BOOTLEG will get you up to $250 in bonus cash and a free Pick'em special to boot. So thank you to Underdog for making this possible. And with that, EJ, let's talk about 2023 so that we can set the table for everything that's happened since then that gives a lot of Steelers fans more hope than maybe they had this time last year.
Steelers in 2023 were an absolute conundrum, and we'll talk about why. Overall record, 10-7. Spoiler alert, they had no business being 10-7, but they were. Ranking the division third, home record 5-4, road record 5-3, incredibly consistent home and away. Last 5 games, 3-2. Now, to set up some of that nuance of how in the hell did this happen, because it really shouldn't have.
TJ Watt.
We have 2 numbers for you. The first one is QBS, or quarterback support. This is a statistic that I came up with Arjun Menon, who works for the Jets in an analytics capacity now. And it's really 5 measures, 3 offensive, 1 defensive, and special teams, talking about how a team set the table for their quarterback to play. How much support did they give them? How did they prepare the field? And it's a 0 to 100 ranking. 0 is the worst, 100 is the best. On that 0 to 100 scale, the Steelers were a 22.6. Now, that placed them 25th out of 32 teams. So far, so good. Most Pittsburgh watchers will say, yeah, it feels about right. Down near the bottom of the league, that looked like Pittsburgh football last year. The other method is Power Score, which we introduced you to last year, which is simply a team's league ranks in 6 categories: rushing offense, passing offense, rush defense, pass defense, points scored, and points allowed. Simply give them their league rank for where they finished, take those 6 numbers, average them out. Lower would be better. If you were first in all those things, that would be great. No team is. The Steelers' Power Score was 16.2, which put them 14th overall. Now, first off, how did they make that number? Rushing offense, 12th. Again, Steelers are always going to run the ball, no matter whether they're good at it or not. Passing offense, dead last in the league, 32nd. That is the death knell for a modern NFL team. If you cannot pass the ball, even competently, you're not going to win in the NFL. Rush defense, 11th. Again, I think Steelers watchers are going to say, yeah, that feels about right. Pass defense, 8th. Surprisingly high. For me putting these numbers together, I was like, did the Steelers have a top 10 pass defense last year? According to EPA, they absolutely did. Points scored, this ties directly to the passing offense, 28th. If you have those 2 numbers, you have the 32nd ranked passing offense and you score the 28th most points, you should lose a lot of football games. You should be a single win team. This is where this sets up. Now, points allowed, good scoring defense, 6th overall. So the Steelers had the largest positive differential in the league between QBS and Power Score, how they set the table and how they actually performed. So they were 25th in QBS. They were 14th in Power Score. This team won double-digit games with the worst passing offense in the league.
Steelers football, baby.
That shouldn't be possible. It's just not real. When you look at it, you go, it's a 10-win team that was the worst passing offense in the league. No.
Bro,
If
they were
somebody-
worse than the Giants.
They're worse than everybody, literally. And to say they won double-digit games yet again, because Mike Tomlin will never lose more games than he wins in a season, is ridiculous. That's coaching, folks. To say that you set the table at one of the lowest levels in the league, but you achieved at what turned out to be a fairly average level is a ridiculous difference. And you don't make that up in roster if you're Pittsburgh. You simply make that up in terms of the position they put those players in. And again, largest positive differential in the league in terms of how they set the table and how they actually performed.
The big thing is turnovers. It was situational football. Again, they weren't a good football team.
Nope.
But they were a good situational football team, and they turned the ball over. They were top 6 in terms of turnover margin per game. So one way to not mitigate, one way to make up for having a completely inept passing offense is to just get more possessions, and also get more possessions in opponents' territory. You know, make it easier to score by just already being in field goal range.
Automatic short field.
Like, I was at the Steelers-Rams game at SoFi last season, and like TJ Watt made plays that just set them up to score, or outright score on defense by themselves. You know, if the offense couldn't do it, the defense was going to do it. So this team was completely carried by their defense's ability to make impact plays, which kind of reflected itself in EPA, because turnovers are like heavily weighted in an EPA, because it's expected points added. If you take the ball away, like, you're going to get a big boost to EPA. So that's kind of what it came down to. Was they weren't great, but they were very good at dragging other teams down to their level. You know, like, what's that old saying? Like, don't get into a fight with a pig because they're comfortable in the mud and they're going to beat you. Like, that was the Steelers, right?
They're going to drag you down and beat you with experience. Yes.
They were so good at making other teams be just as painful to watch as they were, except they're comfortable in that environment. They're comfortable with being just annoying. Like, that's probably the best word to say. They're just annoying to play against, because by all rights they shouldn't be that competitive.
No.
But it felt like every team that played against them played their worst game against them, no matter how good or bad those teams were. It's a fascinating team, and I mean that in like a morbid curiosity kind of way,
And deep admiration for, you shouldn't have, but you did.
But you did.
And you always do. Again, it's not a fluke with Tomlin and the coaching staff. Like, I understand, Steelers fans, that this is a tough brand of football to watch, get used to, and love. But you've had to do it. If you're a Pittsburgh football fan, you are fully integrated into this style of football at this point.
Oh, you know what? I actually had some Pittsburgh whiskey. I just thought of that. I should have brought that out for this episode.
Well, through the magic of editing.
I'm going to go grab it. Hold on.
Yep.
And we're back. All right. How about that? Thank you, editors, for sending us to the slight, very near future. I grabbed this out of my cabinet, which I picked up in Pittsburgh when I was there last summer, I think it was. This is Wiggle Whiskey, which we went and did a tasting over there. I think it's in like the Strip District or something like that. But we tasted like 15 different options that they had there. It's a great micro distillery. This is a rye that is finished in Scotch casks. This is a very acquired taste, but it happens to be my acquired taste. So if you're a rye lover and a Scotch lover, best of both worlds. Wiggle just does a whole bunch of really kind of crazy off-the-wall stuff. They just experiment a lot, and that's what I like about them. So if you're a Pittsburgher and you're listening to this and you like whiskey, go to Wiggle. Well, I'm sure you guys probably know it by now, but still, go to Wiggle. They're great. I believe we were getting to scheme information here, and I want to open up a discussion about what was wrong with Canada, what they think Arthur Smith is going to do to fix what was wrong, how it fits with their current personnel, or maybe doesn't fit. It's it's a little bit of a nuanced, meandering conversation, but it's one that I think Steelers fans need to have amongst themselves to have realistic expectations for this offense. Yes, anything will be better than Matt Canada. I'm not saying they won't be better, but it's kind of an odd fit bringing in Arthur Smith. I mean, it's a good fit in some ways. It's an odd fit in others. So allow me to set the stage for you here, right? So last year, Matt Canada's offense was a disaster. Philosophically, you and I had a lot of problems with it. Their run-pass calls were incredibly predictable based on down and distance. You knew exactly what they were going to do at all times. They didn't stretch the field. They didn't work the middle of the field. You know, Kenny, as far as the areas that he was asked to work in the passing game, it was outside the numbers within 10 yards. And, you know, the screen game was, let's just say, not ideal.
Difficult to watch.
And they over-relied on it for whatever reason. The fact that they pretty much never challenged defenses deep ever meant that defenses didn't really have to worry about it. So they were just constantly playing downhill and jumping everything. And again, that contributed to why the screen game didn't work, other than to Jaylen Warren, because Jaylen Warren's great. But the screen game outside didn't work that well because DBs were just constantly triggering because they had zero fear of ever getting beaten deep ever because they just weren't going to throw it deep. You know, again, not to go too deep into it or too long on it because Canada's not there anymore. There was just a lot of issues with how Canada structured the offense. And Kenny didn't help because Kenny wasn't great either. It's kind of like two bad things just making each other worse, right? So then you bring in Arthur Smith. And Arthur Smith has had success as an OC in the past. Wasn't a great head coach in Atlanta, but he had a lot of success as an OC in Tennessee, which is why he got the Atlanta job in the first place. And to a degree, there's some things that I think translate well to what the Steelers were already doing with Canada. You know, a lot of outside zone, which they liked running outside zone with Matt Canada. Now, not as much as Arthur Smith. When he was in Atlanta last year, they ran outside zone literally more than anybody else in the league by a lot. They were at 54% outside zone. Second place was Kyle Shanahan at 46%. Like, if you're almost beating Kyle Shanahan by 10%, you're running a hell of a lot of outside zone. Pretty much their only change up to that was just running duo, and that really was just about the types of fronts and personnel groupings they were going to get. So if they got certain fronts, they were going to run duo into it just because the angles were better. If they got other fronts, they were going to run outside zone. So again, those two concepts kind of worked off of each other, and that was their entire run game. As far as their passing game, they did work the middle of the field a lot more than the Steelers did, which is good. Like, passing games should work the middle of the field. Correct. That's where a lot of the best passing offenses kind of make their money, is in the middle of the field. They did work down the field a lot. They were top 5 in terms of throwing past the sticks. Like, they didn't really rely on a lot of yards after the catch. They were aggressive in terms of throwing down the field. Now, they didn't throw a lot overall, but when they did, they tried aggressive throws. You know, play action rate was pretty high, which you kind of expect for Arthur Smith. Like, there were elements there in Atlanta that took what the Steelers were trying to do, but they did it better, more competently. Now they have the offensive line to do it, but again, they at least looked like sort of an NFL offense at times. The problem was Desmond Ridder was not an NFL quarterback, and even though they asked him to work the intermediate middle of the field, he kept turning the ball over when working the intermediate middle of the field because he just wasn't good at it. You know, 9 of his 12 interceptions came in between the numbers in the intermediate middle because he would see it, but he would see it a tick late, or he was just flat out inaccurate. He just wasn't good at working that area, which is the difference between, say, an offense like the Niners, where Brock is very good at work in the middle of the field, or, you know, with the Bengals, where Joe is very good at work in the middle of the field, or Stafford or Stroud or any of these top quarterbacks that can work that area without turning the ball over. They just didn't have the quarterback that could pay off that style of play, right? So in some ways, yes, Arthur Smith getting fired was his own fault because he would do all these shenanigans in the red zone and just not give his playmakers the ball.
Shenanigans.
Like 100% shenanigans. Like, it was kind of his own fault. But at the same time, the core of the offense, the bones of the offense, you saw a philosophy that at least has been proven to work elsewhere in the league when the quarterback is competent. Now, Arthur, in terms of how he translates to the Steelers with their current personnel, in theory, a lot of what he did in Atlanta can also work in Pittsburgh. Lots of outside zone. They have the offensive line to do it. They have great athletes. They have the backfield to do it. Najee's good at outside zone. Jaylen Warren is excellent at outside zone. In fact, I think Jalen's an even better running back than Najee. He's more explosive. And he's analytics darling. Great in the screen game. But again, we'll get to them in a little bit. But they got a great 1-2 punch. On paper, they have a great offensive line. They have George Pickens. They have Pat Freiermuth to work the middle of the field. They drafted Roman Wilson, slot extraordinaire. Van Jefferson, we're a fan of. Like, they have pieces to make this work. The problem is the quarterback. And
bum, bum, bum.
It's kind of a big problem because if you have a system that is predicated on being under center, turning your back to the defense with hard play action fakes, and working the middle of the field, has Russell Wilson ever done that in his career successfully? The answer is no. I don't know if I want to be too alarmist about it, but I don't understand why Russ was the pick. I don't understand why they were actively pursuing a Russell Wilson style of quarterback, which is, I am comfortable in the gun. I am comfortable working outside the numbers, especially deep outside the numbers, but Russ has always been a guy who worked outside the numbers, didn't work the middle of the field. If Russ could just be an empty all day, he would. He's always loved that style of play. I don't understand how that fits Arthur Smith.
It doesn't necessarily work very well for what Arthur Smith has done in the past and when he's been most successful. In Tennessee, when they made their strong push for the playoffs, they had Tannehill playing at the highest level he's played at in the NFL, quite frankly. That offense was predicated off hard play action fakes to Derrick Henry and taking very well-timed shots, sometimes across the middle, sometimes outside the numbers. Again, half and half. But again, back to the defense, under center. Russ has never really been that guy ever, and he definitely has never worked the middle of the field in high volume regularly to great effect. So you're sort of taking an offense that worked very well, that has pillars that it's based on, and then saying, 3 of those 5 don't really apply. Just use the rest, which is a strange mix.
Historically, looking at Russ, and I'm talking, going back to the Seattle days, really the only time that he's ever been comfortable under center and, again, turning his back at the defense and throwing it is when it's a very long developing play action shot. Very long. Not a, you look at Jimmy Garoppolo when he was with the Niners where he turned the back and then immediately, plant and fire a second window slant. He didn't do that. It was I am doing a hard fake. I am getting 11 yards deep. Tyler Lockett's running a corner post corner. And then we're going to launch this thing.
I'm patting the ball twice and stepping up.
It's a quadruple move, right?
Right.
That was when he really did it. But he didn't do a lot of okay, we're doing a boot and we have a 3-level read. We got the alert. We got the mid-level, which is usually the primary. And then, we have our guy in the flat. He didn't really do that as much. He definitely didn't do anything that McVay does where, with Stafford when he was under center last year and then he's reading the front side and then he's got the backside dig and you got to get to that and make a crazy throw in between linebackers and under the safety. He didn't do that shit. Not to say that Russ is a bad quarterback. I'm not.
No, but that's never been the strength of his game. So to marry these two, what we're trying to say is it's an odd couple.
It's just weird, right? It's weird that this was the road they went down. Out of all the quarterbacks that were available that I thought fit this style better, and maybe it was a money thing. In fact, it was probably a money thing because Russ costs nothing. So, it's not like they lose anything if it doesn't work out. But I was just surprised that this was the road they went down because I just don't feel like him and Arthur Smith are, symbiotic. I don't know. I could be wrong. We'll see. It's possible Arthur does what every other offensive coordinator that Russ has ever worked with does and just play Russ ball and hope for the best. But I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Fields gets snaps sooner rather than later, because say what you want about Justin Fields, I think he kind of fits Arthur Smith better.
He has some of the characteristics, but again, there are lackings in his game in terms of seeing it on time, throwing it, cutting the ball loose, when he should, where he should, that I think will frustrate a guy like Arthur Smith, who we've seen get frustrated with other pieces of the offense and say, no, we're going to run it my way. Justin, so far, has required a more freeform approach where the coach is more tolerant of, okay, you didn't see one, you didn't see two, and you made three happen. Three was amazing, but the play was made to go to one or two, and you chose three.
The path of most resistance. That's Justin's favorite thing.
That somehow turns into a 60-yard touchdown. So we'll deal with it. But frustration grows when you build an offense and say it's built to hit this. Playmakers get tired of running those routes when they don't see the ball. So there's possible friction there too. That's not a, oh, we're definitely going to see Justin Fields because that's a match made in heaven either. They both have their limitations. And strangely, if you sort of fuse the two of them together, you'd get really good, like 3/4 of a quarterback that I think almost any OC could deal with. But that's not the way it works. You have to play one or the other. And then there's all the other issues that are created when a team doesn't know who their quarterback is. Multiple quarterbacks traditionally don't work historically in the NFL.
It does sound like Russ is getting the first shot, but we'll see how long that lasts, right? Yeah. Kenny Pickett was the guy until he wasn't. So I don't know. If they're still winning games, Russ is still going to be the starter. If things start to slip, they might take a shot there on Justin Fields. Because again, he's still young. He's very talented. Very. Wouldn't be surprised. On defense, this is going to be a lot shorter because the Steelers play Steelers defense. They rush 4. They're very good at rushing 4. They have the guys to do it. They continue to draft really well up front, other than linebacker. But as far as like interior defensive line and edge, that's always been a strength for them. They've collected a lot of talent. Along that defensive line, and they hunt better than most teams. Helps when you have TJ Watt.
Here.
On the back end, they're about as basic as it gets. They're top 3 on both first and second down in terms of playing cover 3, which is basically them saying, we're going to stop the run at all costs. Like, we are going to play cover 3. We are going to fly into the backfield. We're going to get TFLs, and we're just going to get you to third down. And then based on the distance of that third down, they're either going to be in man coverage in cover 1, which is, again, they're going to play you straight up and trust their guys to execute. They haven't had enough good corners to do that in the past few years, but hey, Joey Porter's looking pretty damn good, so at least they got one of them. But they're going to trust their guys to play man if it's like a third and medium to third and short. And if it's third and long, they're going to play cover 2. It's a very, very simple defense, but it works when you have the guys to make it work. Again, I still think they need like one more corner. Like, they're getting there. Like, they got Joey Jr., the other Joey Porter. They got one who's really, really good. I still think they need another to make this system really, really pop as well as I think it could on paper. But it's certainly better now than it was 2 to 3 years ago, and it was already pretty good 2 to 3 years ago. I still think this defense is going to be a top probably 6 to 7 defense in the league as long as everybody stays healthy. Again, they don't do anything flashy. They don't do anything super exotic. They're just really good at what they do. It's a very, assignment sound, execution-based defense more so than it is out scheming you. And, that can work if you have the guys.
That's right. They pick good guys. They pick talented guys. They ask them to go win, and they do at a fairly high rate. A lot of that starts with GM Omar Khan. And his ability to, again, feed this team the talent it needs to play the style it wants to, especially on defense. Talk about the offense as well. He's had success there. We think he had some good success there this year, but on defense, they get the guys they need outside of inside linebacker because they've had some issues there, but everywhere else, this team drafts very, very well. That goes back to Omar Khan. Mike Tomlin, can't really say enough about him as the head coach. He will never come in under 500. He is always the coolest guy in any room he is in. Players gravitate to him. NFL alums gravitate to him. Current NFL players that aren't on the Steelers gravitate to him. Like, the sales pitch to get a free agent to Pittsburgh is, yo, Mike's going to coach you. And they're all like,
okay,
down.
Yeah, as long as you're within like $1 million on the deal, like, I'm there.
We're good. Tomlin's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame.
There's coach. No probably about it.
He is one of the all-time greats. So we won't spend a lot more time on that, but know that we love us some Mike Tomlin. Arthur Smith, we talked about as the offensive coordinator. The defensive coordinator, Terrell Austin, again, plays a continuation of that Pittsburgh style, which is attacking, basic, effective. And he's going to keep doing that. Like, I don't see any major changes coming there. Special teams coach Danny Smith, one of the more tenured special teams coaches in the entire league. Tomlin loves Danny Smith. I'm surprised, actually, that he doesn't have the assistant head coach designation at this point, because he seems like the guy that would in most other franchises. Maybe Pittsburgh just doesn't believe in it, but I believe Danny would be the guy if they did. On offense, Pat Myers, the offensive line coach. Something interesting about pro days. I went to a bunch of pro days this year. You were with me right down the road at the USC one, but I also went to the Oregon State one, the Oregon one, and the UW one. And something you might not know about pro days is there's an agreement between all the teams, because the teams actually run the pro day, not the school.
Yeah.
And that's a misconception. Most people think if you're at the Washington pro day that Washington's running it. No, Washington's just hosting it. There is an agreement of who will run it, and there is a coordinator. There's one for the West Coast and one for the East Coast. And then there is an agreement between all the teams on who will run position-specific drills.
Mm-hmm.
And at all the ones I went to, Pat Meyer was at them, and he ran all the O-line drills. So it was Talisi Fuaga turns to go through the drills. It was Pat Meyer and the offensive line coach from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Bears coach was also there helping out, but like, everybody just defers and knows that Pat's going to run the drills, and they're going to get to see what they want to see. And he did that at each stop. It is a sign of respect. It is a sign of, admiration. And again, that we're going to get what we need if Pat's running them through those drills. Of course, they'll take suggestions. When Pat's running the drills, nobody makes extra suggestions. They get everything they need. The drills get done. And I think that's just a sign of Pat's acceptance, seniority, the sort of admiration the rest of the coaching community has for Pat Meyer, putting together offensive lines. He has a ton of young talent to work with. He's got Broderick Jones. He's got Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick to mold into the next great Pittsburgh line, and I have full confidence he's going to do it. Mike Sullivan, here's the title, Senior Offensive Assistant. If you've been watching this series, this is the ubiquitous title. All teams have one now. 19 seasons as an NFL coach, focused primarily on QBs throughout his time in the NFL. My favorite stat about Mike Sullivan is an Army veteran, and he's a graduate of the Army Airborne, Ranger, and Air Assault schools.
All right, I think I have a new pick for who's going to win the round-robin coach fight tournament.
I wouldn't bet against Mike Sullivan, not ever. Tom Arth is the QB coach, is going to have his hands full. We've talked already a bunch in this episode about the mixed bag that is Pittsburgh quarterbacking heading into 2024. If anybody's going to make it work, he's going to have to try and make this QB room function at a very basic level. That itself is going to be a challenge. Lots of moving pieces. He comes from the Chargers, where he was the passing game specialist for the last 2 seasons. He was a college head coach for 9 seasons total between Akron, Tennessee, Chattanooga, and John Carroll. Again, John Carroll has a very strong coaching legacy. Tom Arth has got his hands full this year. No mistake.
Every John Carroll alum would say that John Carroll is the cradle of football. And I'm saying that for a very specific John Carroll alum / Steelers fan that I know in my own life, who is probably fist pumping out there somewhere when he's listening to this. I'm like, goddamn right we are.
That's
but
right.
You look at all the NFL coaches and, front office people that have come out of John Carroll over the years. Like, that is legitimately an NFL factory. So it's cool to get a John Carroll.
We highlighted John Carroll routinely throughout last year's versions of these episodes. I think we're up to like 9 or 12.
Oh, it's the mafia, man. They're everywhere.
Just checking off John Carroll last year. So you can go back and watch those. On defense and special teams, Carl Dunbar is the defensive line coach. He is the equal to Pat Meyer on the offensive side of the ball. 17 years coaching the defensive line in the NFL. Always has defensive line units that put pressure on the quarterback and play consistently, cohesively, and at a very high level. Again, Pittsburgh's defense depends on its defensive line's ability to create pressure. That comes back to Carl Dunbar. And Aaron Curry is the inside linebackers coach. His second year working with the inside linebackers in Pittsburgh after his stint with the Seahawks. Yes, it's the same Aaron Curry that was an overall high draft pick of the Seahawks, one of the all-time draft busts. Really cool that the Seahawks gave him his ability to come back into coaching, and that he's developed enough that Mike Tomlin tabbed him and said, come work at a very important piece on my staff. Primarily going to be the coach responsible for getting the most out of big-time free agent addition Patrick Queen and this year's wildly talented third-round pick Peyton Wilson, who we will talk about when we get to the draft.
As far as like rangy, explosive linebacking cores go, again, on paper, the Steelers do have one of the better ones, or I should say one of the rangier, more explosive groups in the league. So curious to see if Aaron Curry can get the most out of those guys. Moving on from front office and coaching staff, that does bring us finally to the underdog top 3, which for everybody listening to this who plays fantasy football, which I assume is the vast majority of you, we do this segment for every single team, which is where we try to identify the best values for every team. Not the best players, but the best values relative to where they're going right now. Steelers are kind of tough because as we talked about earlier, I'm not 100% sure how this is all going to fit together just because of who the quarterback or quarterbacks are and who the OC is. The only thing I know beyond the shadow of a doubt is that George Pickens is a perfect fit for Russell Wilson. Not necessarily for what Arthur Smith might have him do, but for Russell, as far as being that big, go-get-it, contested catcher down the boundary. We know Russ historically loves those kind of receivers that he can just throw the ball up to and give him a chance. George Pickens is a very good fit for that particular type of receiver that Russ likes. He's going as wide receiver 28 right now. As the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on this team, not often you see a true wide receiver 1 not even be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. So if there's a value to be had in this receiving core, he's probably it.
I would say so. He also reminds me characteristic-wise of what they were really looking for in Tennessee when Tannehill would throw those shots. Again, they would take a few shots. They were very planned. They were sort of purposeful, like notes within the game plan of we are going to work ourselves to this and this is going to be our chunk play. And you could do a lot worse than George Pickens, skill-wise, if you are looking to take a few chunk play shots and you need them to hit.
On the other side, Van Jefferson, believe it or not, is going as wide receiver 129. So basically undrafted.
That's not basically undrafted.
Pretty much undrafted.
That's definitely undrafted.
We put him as a value because you can literally get him in the last round. And if he does anything, and I mean anything at all, like, okay, you're getting some out. Again, we are scraping the bottom of the barrel here for what we think will be a oddly fit together passing game. I thought about doing Roman Wilson, but I also just wasn't sure how much 11 personnel they were even going to run this year. So he's kind of a question mark. I wouldn't be shocked if he outproduces Van Jefferson, but I just really don't know how much he's going to be on the field. Not that I don't like him as a player. I really do. But Arthur Smith is not an OC that typically likes to live in 11 personnel unless he absolutely has to. He wants to be in 12. He wants to be in 21 or 13 and just run and run and run and run and run, which of course then brings us to the backfield, which is a whole different can of worms in its own right. The choice between Najee and Jaylen Warren, I don't know if I have a good answer for you because Najee's going as RB21 and Jaylen Warren's going as RB24, which is the market's way of saying, I don't know. I got nothing for you. And even I, at this point, I don't know if I would 100% pull the trigger on Najee at 21. I would think about Warren at RB 24 just because I think Warren's the better player. But I don't feel great about it. So there's just not a whole lot of values I can really look at on this Steelers. I mean, I struggled to get to 3. And don't even get me started on the quarterbacks. I mean, no. Russ is going as QB 31 and Justin's going as QB 32. So again, nobody knows anything here. As far as I'm concerned, take Pickens and leave the rest, I guess, is probably the best place I can leave it.
It's a very muddy picture in terms of fantasy, in terms of offensive output, in terms of who's going to be statistical leader or a go-to guy on this offense. I don't care if you're talking about passing or rushing. I wouldn't put a tab on any of them. Pickens, yeah, clear-cut wide receiver 1 as the team stands right now. Other than that, yeah, I really think Jaylen Warren's talented. How much are they going to use him? How much is Arthur Smith going to like him? After what he just did in Atlanta, from a fantasy perspective, yeah, I'm with you. Pickens, sure, go ahead. Anybody else, you're on your own.
That's the one hard thing is like, even if Warren is playing better, or even if Najee is playing better, doesn't mean that Arthur's going to give him the ball in the red zone.
Nope.
So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. Multiple layers of frustration incoming.
So I guess the overall message here is just monitor the ADPs. Check back with Underdog as you're doing all your drafts throughout this summer. Just keep an eye on where these guys are going. See if there's any sort of separation during camp or during the preseason, because maybe we'll get some kind of clarity throughout August. Again, we're recording this on July 8th at 10:30 at night, so we have no clarity now. No. In a few weeks, maybe we will by the time this goes live. So again, I encourage you guys, use the QR code on the screen, check out Underdog, see where guys are going, and make adjustments as necessary. All right, let's get to free agency. I mean, I really want to talk about the draft because the draft was amazing, but we'll do free agency first, set the stage for all the losses and all the gains.
We'll talk about the most notable players in terms of percentages of snaps they played last year, their role on the team last year. Patrick Peterson, the veteran cornerback at this point, moves on. 97.1% of the snaps last year for the Steelers. I don't think anybody in Pittsburgh is necessarily sad about that, but it was a significant number of snaps. They have a plan to replace it. We'll see how it goes. Mason Cole, the center, played 100% of their snaps. Really rare to see any player at any position play 100% of the snaps. Again, they have a succession plan in place for Mason Cole moving on, but that's notable. Lots of other players. Levi Wallace is now with the Broncos. He was 64.3% of the snaps. Kenny Pickett is an Eagle via trade. Deontay Johnson, longtime wide receiver 1 for the Steelers, is now with the Panthers. He was only 55.1% of the snaps. He's going to be the Panthers' lead receiver. Again, the Steelers think they have a plan to replace him, and given Arthur Smith's tendencies, they might not even need to replace him in numbers. We'll see how that goes. And then Chuks Okorafor, the right tackle, is now a Patriot. 40% of the snaps last year, more in the past. Those are the most notable ones. We'll put everybody else up on screen. But again, nothing.
Wow, the disrespect to a franchise legend, Mason Rudolph.
Oh, are we doing that? Are we doing that?
Okay, how about this? Off the top of your head.
I don't want to do that game.
If I told you that Mason Rudolph had more career passing yardage with the Steelers than Kenny Pickett, would you believe it?
Yes.
I don't know if it's true, but the fact that you would believe it says a lot.
Yes, I would believe it.
I am going to check that, by the way, to see if it's true, and we'll flash an answer on the screen. I wouldn't be surprised if it's close.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's competitive, yeah.
But yeah, anyway, Mason Rudolph, franchise legend.
Franchise legend.
He's now a Titan.
Would they take Mason? No, I'm not even going to do that.
All right, in terms of who they did keep, Montravius Adams, back at it again.
Let's go!
Montreux, age 29 already. Time flies. So he's back at a very reasonable $2.6 million. Miles Killebrew, special teams extraordinaire, is back at about $3.25. Really curious to see what kind of role he's going to have in the new kickoff structure, because his skill set is very, very wanted and desired. in this new kickoff structure is somebody who can play in space and tackle in space and probably block pretty well too. So curious to see how they use him. And then as far as third-party additions, obviously you got Justin Fields brought in via trade with Chicago. Deshaun Elliott brought in from Miami to round out the safety room at about $3 million. Pretty reasonable deal there. Cordarrelle Patterson. I'll tell you what, speaking to that new kickoff structure, if you thought
Ding, ding.
Patterson was already one of the greatest returners, or really just one of the greatest special teamers ever, which he is, can you imagine if he played his entire career with these new kickoff rules? He would have shattered every single record. And he still might break the record, but he would have shattered the record if he played in this new kickoff structure the entire time. They brought him in specifically for that, by the way. Van Jefferson, we mentioned they brought him in. Dante Jackson, he's ideally going to be the other starting corner opposite Joey Porter Jr. Again, I still think they need one more, particularly when they're going into their nickel looks. Patrick Queen, pretty reasonable deal, about 13.7 million to be a starting linebacker for them. I guess we could throw Michael Pruitt in there as well on notable signings. Has some familiarity with Arthur Smith going back to Atlanta. So not crazy money thrown around for the most part. I mean, Patrick Queen was the one big-ish deal, but overall, like nothing insane, everything pretty reasonable. I thought they spent well. I thought they spent responsibly. They filled the holes that they needed to fill going into the draft. And the reason why they did that was to free themselves up to attack the offensive line in the draft as aggressively as humanly possible. They wanted to go into April with as few needs as they could so that when in doubt, if they were choosing between a linebacker and an offensive lineman, if they were choosing between a receiver and an offensive lineman, they were going to go with the offensive lineman most of the time. They wanted that freedom. And to be honest, I can't argue with the results.
No, the results from the draft were spectacular. The Steelers got 3 of my favorite players in the draft in one draft. In this draft class, 3 of my favorite players at any position ended up as Steelers. Love it when that happens for a team. We'll start off with Troy Fautanu, the tackle from Washington. Got to see him up close last season. Very, very talented player. They have him penciled in at right tackle right now. A lot of people were speculating, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Sounds like the Steelers are going to give him first shot at tackle. Again, they got him at the 20th pick overall. A huge piece, really be a solid end for the new look Steelers offensive line that's going to pave the way for this offensive attack in their mind for years to come. Zach Frazier, the center from West Virginia, 2nd round, pick 51. Love me some Zach Frazier. Would have really enjoyed his presence in Chicago, but wherever he went, and the fact that he played his college football at West Virginia, he ends up playing at Pittsburgh is super fun because, of course, Pitt and West Virginia have a massive college rivalry, so people are going to get over that real quickly.
Well, the last Pitt guy they picked didn't work out so well, so all right, let's go to the other side.
Also true. Let's just pivot. Y'all are going to love Zach Frazier. He is a hard-nosed center. I think the best center in this draft. I had him rated as the top center in this draft. And again, you pair him with picks they made last year, Fautanu this year. They have rebuilt their line over the course of 2 seasons, and it's really cool. It's stocked with players I think are going to be tremendously effective in that system, really, or anywhere else, but I love their fit in Pittsburgh as well. Roman Wilson, the wide receiver from Michigan, 3rd round, pick 84. This was high for me. I was lower on Roman Wilson than almost anybody I know. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a good NFL player. Everybody I know, with very few exceptions, some people I really respect had him lower as I did. But in general, the consensus on Roman Wilson, I think, was much higher than what I saw on tape. Like, he made plays in very big spots for a very big team, and I think that elevated his stock. He's a tremendous athlete. He's a great story. He's a great kid. On the field, I thought he was very average as a wide receiver, but I'm going to defer to Pittsburgh. They have a tremendous history of drafting and developing wide receivers, so far be it from me to say the Steelers screwed up on a wide receiver pick, because generally I would be wrong.
I don't remember the last time they did screw up on a receiver pick. Like, I truly can't remember the last one that whiffed.
That was even like super lukewarm. Like, they hit on wide receivers. So, going to give him the benefit of the doubt on Roman Wilson. He certainly has all the athletic tools and the drive to be a very successful receiver at the next level. I just didn't see it on his college tape at Michigan. We get to Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from North Carolina State, also a third-round pick, number 98 overall. Wildly talented, was my number one inside linebacker in terms of tape on the field. Super high impact player. And by that, I mean number of impact plays, frequency, the type, the area. It's all over the field. It's tackles for loss. It's sacks. It's tackles way out at the boundary. On screen game, it's covering tight ends deep down the seam. Doesn't matter. Forward, backwards, sideways. Is super fast, 23 miles an hour in pads and GPS on the field. The problem was injuries. It's the reason he lasted until later in the third round. If he stays healthy, and I know you're traumatized Steeler fans because we said this about your draft class last year, and they didn't all necessarily stay healthy.
Hey, man, the 1 week where Corey Trice was a future Pro Bowler, it's the best week of my life.
You hit it! Oh,
not
you
quite.
were right on both counts. Very talented, also injury prone. Hopefully Peyton Wilson stays healthy. He does have a litany of injury history throughout his time in college, but when he's on the field, and he has been on the field quite a lot, he's had a lot of injuries, but he's also played a lot of football. And when he's there, you won't miss him. It's not a player you wait more than a few plays within a series to go, oh, there he is again, because he just consistently makes huge impact plays. Love the Peyton Wilson pick. And then Mason McCormick, one of our favorites, the guard from South Dakota State, 4th round, 119. Thought this was incredible value for him. He is going to start for the Steelers. Not necessarily this year, but soon. And when he does, he's not leaving the field. Mark my words.
He can play guard. He can play center. So they've insulated themselves at 2 positions as far as injury goes. Like he is the ultimate swing, right? He's one of the few guards that has experience calling protections because they had a younger center at South Dakota State. So he was the one who called it as a guard. So, that's why when he was working out at center at Shrine Bowl and doing all the snapping and everybody's like, oh, yeah, he's kind of a natural there. Like, how are you with protection? He's like, oh, yeah, I already called those. They're like, as a guard? And he's like, yeah. So he could easily play center if something catastrophic happens to Zach Frazier or what have you. Like, they can slide him in at any of those 3 interior spots, and he's going to play well. I do want to back up to Peyton Wilson a little bit. How you felt about Roman Wilson is how I felt about Peyton Wilson.
I realized that those are a swap, and they were drafted back to
the
back
other
by the
Wilson
same team.
Yeah, it's not that I didn't see it. Like, I saw what other people saw, but I just didn't value that skill set as much as other people did. Mainly, it was just kind of an alignment thing. Like, if you're looking at his tape at NC State, he didn't really line up like a traditional linebacker, or really didn't line up like a linebacker in the NFL. It was kind of a flexed out hybrid nickel Sam type role. He would rush off the edge. Honestly, if you were projecting him to be like an Andrew Van Ginkel type, I could see that. Or like a Leonard Floyd type. I could see that as like an edge player that also drops into coverage. But if we're talking about him as an inside linebacker, I don't know if I saw that. So I'm curious to see how they're going to play him, because they don't really play that type of role in this defense, like that Van Ginkel, Van Noy, Leonard Floyd type Sam linebacker. They don't really do that. So I'm fascinated to see how they deploy him. It's not that I didn't like the player. It's just skill set wise, I was kind of like, I don't know, kind of a narrow role. Might depend on where he goes. Yeah, Pittsburgh was just an interesting destination for him. But I'm with you on all the other ones, or at least on the offensive line picks. Like, they crushed every single O-line pick. And if there is anything that is going to make this offense work, even though OC and quarterback I don't think fit very well together, if there's something that's going to make it work anyway, it's this offensive line. Like, that is the straw that stirs the drink to me.
Yeah. Moving on, they got Logan Lee, the interior defensive lineman from Iowa in the 6th round at 178. Has some classic Steelers traits. This is a big, strong dude that could set the edge, control his man, keep an arm free to tackle. Is he super dynamic? No, that's why he went in the 6th round. Is he a strong, tough Big Ten defensive lineman that can hold up at the point of attack? Yup, sure is. So he has some traits that they like. And Ryan Watts, the safety out of Texas, also in the 6th round at 195. Again, they can use some help in the secondary, but I really think this is a special team.
100% special teams. Yeah.
So overall, top to bottom in the draft, when you start off that strong, Fautanu, Frazier, Wilson, and McCormick, I am with you 100% of the way.
I would be stunned if they didn't get at least 3 high-end starters from this class. Eventually. 2 of them immediately, the 3rd one eventually. But I would be stunned if these guys don't work out. In fact, all 3 of these guys were like 3 of the top 5 offensive linemen that I had 0 worries about.
Yep.
Like, if these guys fail, I give up. Because, their profiles were just so clean. I just can't imagine they don't work out. All right. That brings us to UDFAs, who they got after the draft. A few notable names here. John, you know what? Now that I think about it, I only watched all 22. I never watched broadcasts. Is it Reese Plumley or Rise Plumley?
It's Reese. I say Reese, but...
quarterback at a UCF, super talented. Tons of talent. Might make QB3, but most likely he might be a practice squad stash at first because he's still got a long ways to go. But he's got talent. Dejon Edwards, the running back out of Georgia, the other Georgia running back. It's a tough room to crack. He might also be a practice squad guy for them. I don't know if he's going to make the 53. Beanie Bishop Jr., corner out of West Virginia. I did not watch him, but you highlighted him on this list. Why is that?
Really aggressive player that has a mentality I love at corner. Is super physical, super feisty. His feet are very good in coverage. I thought he was underrated. I know some other analysts, Luke Easterling was a huge fan of Beanie Bishop, thought he had even a higher grade on him than I did. I definitely thought he was draftable. To get him as a UDFA is real value.
All right. Well, we're through April. We also went through March. We unfortunately rehashed last August through last January. Brings us to our final segment, which is where we answer the question to start. Did this team get better, worse, or stay the same? And we answer that with either a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or a thumbs even. For me, and I kind of went back and forth on this, I do have reservations about how coaching staff and quarterback is going to mesh. And I've brought it up over and over and over again. I have reservations about that. But they did make some pretty crucial personnel additions, whether you're looking at offensive line, whether you're looking at secondary, whether you're looking at linebacker. Like, they just got better players this year. And I just kind of default to Arthur Smith being better than Matt Canada no matter what, regardless of how much he fits with Russ. So it's a slight up, but still an up. I just didn't feel comfortable going even because I think overall there's more positive than negative here. I'm not saying that they massively improved. I'm not saying they're going to make a run at a first seed. I'm not even saying they're going to win the division. But I do think that they're better than they were this time last year.
I had the same back and forth kind of deliberation about this Pittsburgh team versus last year's Pittsburgh team. And it came down to importance of the positions that I have the most questions about. Again, as you mentioned, they got better in the secondary. They got better at safety. They got better at inside linebacker. Did those positions really move the needle in the modern NFL as much as quarterback and wide receiver? And the answer is no, they do not. And they have significant questions. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm just saying I can't clearly understand how it is going to work. So I ended up, as my needle sort of wavered back and forth, at even.
And all of that is fair. And I think most Steelers fans would probably agree with it too. They might even agree with our ceiling and floor.
Maybe. We'll see.
It's a pretty narrow cone, right? Because we know they're not going to be below 500.
This is my most narrow range in the entire series because Tomlin will never have a losing season. However, I don't think they're going to be super successful. So that leaves a very narrow band.
It's like 2 games. Their minimum is 9 because I just can't imagine they're going to be below 9. And I think it's going to stay that way forever. But my max for them is 11. It's not that much higher. It's probably a 6 seed. Not a 6 seed that I think could be like a sneaky Super Bowl contender, but like a solid 6 seed. Might give you a game in the wild card round, might even win a wild card game. Probably won't get past the division round. And again, I think Steelers fans would be okay with that as long as they're just watchable and entertaining. I think that would be a massive improvement over previous years of this team and what Steelers fans have had to put up with. But I don't expect 12 wins. I don't expect 13. I don't expect win the division. I don't expect challenging for a first seed. I don't expect them being on the same level as like the true contenders in the AFC. They're probably a wild card team. And that's okay.
If they hit that level, if they hit 12 or 13 wins, and I say this in all seriousness, that would be coach of the year shit for Mike Tomlin.
Oh, yeah. If this team wins 13, are you kidding me?
It would be shoe-in stuff for Mike Tomlin. My cone's even more narrow. 9 is the floor because I am not betting against Mike Tomlin to lose more games than he wins. But I can't see more than 10 wins out of this team given the uncertainty. Could they get on a roll? Could the offensive line gel early on? Could the defense maintain its level? It's all possible. Might they squeak out 11 maybe? As I thought about it, I thought, it feels like if this team plays really well, it's a 10-win team. Could still go to the playoffs. Could still challenge for the division because this division beats the living hell out of each other. Like, as a 10-win team, that sounds weird, but it's not so weird if you follow the AFC North. So 10's my ceiling and 9's my floor, and I guarantee that's going to be my most narrow gap of this entire series.
Here's what I know for a matter of fact is going to happen. Like, it's so predictable, and Steelers fans, don't you dare disagree with me on this because deep down you know it's true. They're going to win 10 games, and 2 of those 10 wins are going to be against teams that they should not have beaten. That absolutely 100% they should have lost to, but they're going to do this weird fucking Steelers magic bullshit. And they're going to win those games, yep. Right? TJ Watt's going to do something crazy. They're going to get a kick return. Renegade's going to start playing in the fourth quarter and the other team's just going to melt. Like,
wait, TJ Watt's going to get a kick return?
At this point, I wouldn't doubt it.
Sure.
But at the same time, even though they're going to get 2 of those crazy wins that they shouldn't get, they're also going to lose 2 games to teams that they should have boat raced in classic Steelers fashion. And they're going to end up at 10 wins. And Steelers fans are going to be sitting there saying, God, we could have won 12. We could have won the division. We could have been a 2 or a 3 seed. Next year, they're going to do it. Next year, they're finally going to live up to their expectations. They're going to stop dropping games that they absolutely should win. And they're going to go into 2025 with these crazy expectations of, again, Steelers gone to the Super Bowl, channeling my inner tree. And they're going to keep doing it over and over and over again. They're going to always balance the highest highs with the lowest possible lows. And they're going to end up at 10. And they're going to be a wild card team. And they're going to play just the ugliest, most abhorrent playoff football you've ever seen. And it's going to be like a 2-point game in the fourth quarter. And we're all just going to be wishing for death in the middle of January. And then by the time we get to July, we're going to say, they might have a shot.
They were this close.
I know it's going to happen because it happens every fucking year. Every year. And again, Steelers fans know it. They can't deny it.
No, it is a pattern at this point. They are going to be an interesting team. I think if you're a Steelers fan, the points to focus on are the development of young players, especially on the offensive line. That's going to set the foundation for success for years to come, whether it's this season or next or the year after. That's what it's going to be built on. Again, on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to look very similar. And you're just going to get more Steelers football that's slightly better than it was last year, but probably just as confusing.
If they keep improving at this rate, by 2035, they might win the whole thing. We'll see. Well, Steelers fans, I hope you found this enjoyable and enlightening, and I'm sure a lot of you already rage clicked out of this a long time ago. So if you're another AFC North fan and you're still watching this, I hope you enjoyed it at least. If you want to look for any sort of NFL merch, whether it's Steelers or another AFC North team or any other NFL team, or you want to get bootleg merch, or you want to get 80s slasher films merch, really whatever you want, college football. Homage has the license for pretty much everything at this point. Anything you get at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen, we get a cut of it, whether it's a bootleg thing or not. So a good way to passively support the show. Also, thank you to Underdog for helping to make this show possible. And thank you to our patrons as well, especially in the executive producer tier, for sticking by us for so many years and funding us even when we didn't have sponsors. They were there in the beginning. So thank you to all of you. We're going to get out of here before I pissed off Western Pennsylvania even more than I already have. Tomorrow is Browns Day. Boy. Yeah.
One to the next.
Browns Day. All right. I need to think long and hard about how I approach tomorrow.
Are you going to learn from today's mistakes tomorrow, Brad?
Are the Browns going to learn from their mistakes? How about that? How about we start with that, EJ?
Sorry, that was a terrible setup on my part. We should probably go before we're just firebombing the entire AFC North.
All right, Cleveland's tomorrow. We'll see you then.